Help for first home buyers on its way with the federal government's home equity sharing scheme given a start date. Australia's unemployment rate is ticking upwards. And why Aussie gym brand F45 is set to delist from the New York Stock Exchange. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Friday, the 18th of August, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson and Sean Almer's nearly on his way back home. But in the meantime, I'm still joined by Jennifer Duke. Jen, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Jen, you've got an interview coming up after the show. This is a very interesting one with the head of a very influential body. You're speaking to Louise Davidson, the CEO of the Australian Council of Superannuation Investors.
Yeah, we had a really interesting chat about how different board members across Australia are navigating through shifting their companies to net zero.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's coming up a little bit later on. Definitely worth sticking around for. The main story this morning, Jen, Labor kicked off its 49th national conference in Brisbane yesterday, which is the party's biggest decision-making forum. The first cab off the rank was a big housing announcement.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese revived his first home buyer scheme Help to Buy and said it would start in 2024. Now, this is a shared equity scheme and was part of the government's election campaign, but it fell off the agenda until yesterday. The federal government will chip in up to 40% of the purchase price of a new home and 30% of the cost of an existing home under the plan. In turn, the government holds a stake in the property, and it means that first home buyers can purchase with as little as 2% for a deposit in some cases and help avoid costly lenders' mortgage insurance.
You mentioned that it would start in 2024. Do we know any more details around that, when people can actually kind of start using it, first home buyers?
Yeah, so it is subject to legislation, but they're aiming to fast track that so it can be used in the first half of next year. It's intended to help 40,000 households over 4 years. There are a few hurdles, though, to be eligible, including income and assets tests, and there's caps on the value of the home that you can buy.
All right. Now, National Conference is a big event. I mean, everyone in politics watches it. Everyone in business is keeping an eye on it because of the announcements and things that are generally made. What else are we expecting to see?
So there was an awful lot on the agenda yesterday and a few highlights that I'll get into, but it does continue over the weekend. So there's an awful lot more to come in this space. The Construction and Manufacturing Union was calling for a 40% tax on excess profits for big corporates. Now that's similar to what the Greens have been looking for, but the motion that they actually ended up putting forward was a little bit more measured. They want more social and affordable housing investment, and they want it funded by a progressive and sustainable tax system, including corporate tax reform. There were requests for increased efforts to support demand for electric and zero-emissions vehicles and to deploy methane-reducing livestock technologies. Another significant issue was the AUKUS deal, and a new internal party lobby group called Labor Against War has been formed. Labor's also agreed to make it a priority for superannuation to be added to government-paid parental leave in an effort to close the gap on super. This has been something the government has backed in the past, though, but hasn't done anything about.
It's interesting, isn't it, that when Labor is in power, the National Conference takes on a lot more significance, doesn't it?
It really does, and I think this will define sort of the next few years. Anthony Albanese said that they wanted to create a party platform that would send them to victory in 2025. So this is clearly all about election positioning.
This could be the longest campaign in history. We're now gearing up for a 2-year election campaign, and this is the agenda. All right, how did local markets perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed down 0.7% to 7146 points. Real estate investment trusts, energy and utilities all showed signs of growth. Ingham's Group was the top performer with a 14.8% jump. The poultry producer reported net profit of $60.4 million. The next best was IPH, up 10.8%. Healthcare continued to slump, and alongside gold and industrials led the declines. The worst performer was minor core lithium, which fell 24.8% after a trading halt for a capital raising. Lake Resources fell 8.5%. Property listings portal Domain Holdings dropped 7.8%. Its 2023 group profit missed expectations.
I think it's really fascinating. You mentioned Ingham's Group there and the fact that they did have this excellent profit and the investors loved it, 14.8% jump in its share price. And it all kind of boils down to cost of living crisis. People are eating more chicken.
That's 100% right. That's what they were saying their increased sales were all about.
It's just remarkable, those kind of very human, very basic kind of stories that can make up some of these big corporate results. Looking overseas, what's happening in international markets?
CBA's head of international economics, Joseph Capurso, is warning that the deteriorating Chinese economy could send the Aussie dollar falling below US 60 cents. So I don't think Sean's going to be very happy about this one. That would be lows not seen since pre-COVID. This coincides with a Financial Times analysis of foreign investment activity in China, which found a rapid dumping of Chinese stocks and bonds. Their calculations suggest about US $7.4 billion of Chinese equities have been sold amid concerns about the state of the economy. The US Federal Reserve released its meeting minutes showing it is still nervous about rising inflation, but indicating they see some downside risks to economic activity and jobs. And the UK has reported a drop in headline inflation for July, but underlying price growth has failed to slow, and this will put pressure on the Bank of England.
All right, there is a fair bit going on, and we've got a lot to cover this morning. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Jen, the national unemployment rate increased to 3.7% in July. Now, your day job is you work as the economics correspondent for Capital Brief. So you must spend a lot of time kind of looking at figures like this and figuring out exactly what this data shows.
I do. I spend a lot of time speaking to the people that actually know what they're talking about because I just report on the experts. But the 0.2 percentage point increase revealed by the Australian Bureau of Statistics was a weaker result than most of them were expecting. There were 14,600 fewer people in work and an extra 36,000 people considered unemployed. Now, that's another sign the economy is cooling, but joblessness is still considerably lower than pre-pandemic, so the market is still relatively tight. There were more hours worked in July overall, with fewer people than normal taking leave over the school holiday period. The ABS says this also shows that demand for extra workers is being met by people who are already employed taking on extra hours.
All right, so looking ahead then, what's this mean for inflation? What's this mean for interest rates?
So EY chief economist Sherelle Murphy says it shows the rate hikes are working as intended and inflation is slowing as well. She says it will reinforce the case for rates to stay on hold. AMP Capital's Diana Musina has a similar outlook. But ANZ's Adam Boyton said it was a weaker result than he expected, even though it fits in with the RBA's view of the economy. He cautions that the unemployment rate jumps about quite a bit on monthly figures, so we'll need a few more months' data to be confident about what is really happening right now.
All right. Now, we talk a lot about Telstra, and obviously Telstra is a very closely watched stock because it's the most widely held stock in Australia. And so yesterday, finding out that Telstra has delivered a 13% jump in profit to $2.05 billion. Very interesting, but it's decided against selling off its infrastructure.
So Telstra CEO Vicky Brady said that the mobile business is doing really well, but the fixed enterprise is facing some trouble. And as you flagged, one of the most interesting revelations is that they're no longer looking at selling the infrastructure arm. Now, it's called InfraCo Fixed. And InfraCo holds all of Telstra's subsea cables, data centres and fibre assets, and it's valued at about $15 billion, with income of $1.6 billion over 2023. There's been regular commentary about the potential sale of this part of the business, but Brady said there is strong demand for the infrastructure right now because of the big shift to cloud and artificial intelligence adoption, and that's driving the need for these services. So they want to hang on to it at the moment. Telstra is paying a final dividend of 8.5 cents per share, bringing the total dividend to 17 cents per share.
Another company reporting yesterday, definitely worth a mention, Super Retail Group, which owns Rebel and BCF and Supercheap Auto, has given shareholders a special dividend of 25 cents a share following a solid profit and sales increase.
Annual group sales jumped 7% to $3.8 billion, with Rebel and Supercheap hitting record turnover results. Statutory net profit increased 9% to $263 million. The best performing category for the group was actually auto maintenance, which is on the back of a shift towards DIYing vehicle care.
I have to laugh when you get to DIY vehicle care, Jen, because clearly you're not talking to me. I struggle to do anything with my vehicle of any kind. I rely heavily on mechanics to assist me. So I suspect that Super Retail Group is not seeing an uplift in DIY care from the Thompson household.
They can't thank you for that.
No, I'm no help to them. Sorry.
That's no good. I'm more in the DIYing mechanic category. I don't know if I'm any good at it though. So I probably end up just giving the mechanics more money in the long run. I try. I really try.
Oh, you've learned fascinating things about people doing this show. I never knew that you were a bit of a DIY mechanic. That's really cool.
There you go. We do our best. And that special dividend that you mentioned will be paid alongside the 44-cent final dividend in October. But this financial year, sales have started to show signs of slowing for some of their brands. And to offset this, they're growing their loyalty club members and intend to leverage these customers with a relaunch of Rebel's loyalty program ahead of Christmas.
Now, Jen, this next story is probably not going to come as a great surprise for a lot of people. Petrol prices have hit a new high this year, and unfortunately, it's likely that the pain at the pump is going to continue for at least a couple more weeks.
That's right. The Australian Institute of Petroleum found the average retail price for petrol hit 196.5 cents a litre this week. The worst prices were in Sydney, Adelaide and Hobart, all above $2, with Brisbane the cheapest, around 188 cents. Regional Australia's average is 194.6 cents, and diesel has also hit a near 8-month high. These price hikes are all due to high demand in the global oil market and supply cuts. And this is compounded by the weaker Australian dollar right now, making it even more expensive to buy petrol. This is a higher cost for households and businesses, which could flow on into other prices if it remains up.
Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, Jen, may need to come up with a new game plan for the name of its online home loan platform after floating the idea of calling it Matilda. I kind of feel like that might already be taken.
Well, the yet-to-be-released digital-only mortgage platform is expected to help the bank grow its home loan volumes organically by 4 to 5% this financial year. The new platform will be launched in a trial with Finsure in November, and Bendigo Bank told The Australian that, yes, it would potentially name the platform Matilda, which may be an act of marketing gold, or they might just be facing an awful lot of competition for the name.
I suspect they might be. Now, the Matildas, we do need to talk about this because they might have lost their semi-final, but they are going to go down in TV ratings history, won't they?
Absolutely. The OzTam figures are showing that more than 7 million Australians tuned in to watch the game, and that was the first time we've seen a figure that high since the current rating system existed. Even more incredible, 11.2 million Australians tuned in at some point during the 90-minute game. Nearly 1 million were watching via 7 Plus app.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it? Now, Origin Energy has posted an 83.5% jump in core net profit for the past financial year, better than guidance, and is expecting its earnings in energy markets to increase in 2024.
Net income over the past year hit $1 billion in a significant rebound following write-downs in 2022, where they had a $1.4 billion loss. While next year's guidance is looking solid, the year after will potentially be softer as tariffs decline. Origin also announced a final dividend of 20 cents a share, up from 16.5 cents the year before. An underlying full-year profit increased to $747 million.
Now, that all sounds like very good news, obviously, for investors, but the Australian Council of Trade Unions is a little bit bothered by the profits.
Yeah, the ACTU says customers are facing bill rises of up to 25% in some parts of the country this year. And as such, they reckon these sorts of profits are hard to swallow when there are people going without heating and hot water to make ends meet. The union is undertaking a price gouging inquiry at the moment, and it says that energy and utility services are the third most common topic of submissions so far.
All right, one more before we get to international news. This has a bit of an international flavour to it. Australia's relationship with India is going through an historic sea change with shared defence, migration, security and trade ties. That is all according to India's External Affairs Minister, Subramaniam Jaishankar.
Anthony Albanese is set to visit India early in September for the G20 Leaders Summit. Dr. Jaishankar spoke to reporters from The Australian in Delhi and said he was puzzled that the relationship between Australia and India had been undervalued for so long. He said he was bullish on the relationship and could see no limits to how it would develop. He also said India was confident in stepping up the scale of their relationship with the US. India is seen as an increasingly critical trade partner, in part to balance the dominance of China.
All right, turning to international news, which is very much along the same lines. The US, Japan and South Korea are setting up a three-way hotline as part of a growing alliance between the countries.
President Joe Biden's Deputy Assistant Kurt Campbell said the US would invest in the technology to create this hotline as part of developing relations with the two Northeast Asian allies. Bloomberg reports this is an effort to better manage regional challenges from China and North Korea. The three countries' leaders are currently convening for a summit, which will become an annual event. China's state-run Global Times has cited local experts that describe the new setup as a mini NATO that would actually harm stability in the region.
Now, this is an interesting one, Jen. Rideshare operators like Uber and Lyft could be forced to provide only zero-emission or wheelchair-accessible cars in New York City by 2030. It's part of a proposal from Mayor Eric Adams and the Taxi and Limousine Commission.
If it goes ahead, then it's going to start pretty rapidly with the so-called Green Rides plan to be phased in from 2024. And to start with, 5% of all trips and big lift sharing companies would need to be undertaken by these sorts of vehicles. That would then rise in a staggered fashion, reaching 25% in 2026 and so on. And this is part of a big push on EVs, which the city reckons will get much more affordable after that point. Improving air quality in New York and encouraging the production of charging infrastructure are partly behind the push.
Now, last one, Jen, F45, the gym chain, is going to delist from the New York Stock Exchange after falling behind on filing financial reports and seeing its share price sit below $1. The thing is that, and the reason why there is so much interest in F45, particularly in Australia, is because it was founded in Australia with just one gym, and it just grew and grew and grew from there. And we have actually talked about it a fair bit on Fear and Greed, because Sean often heads off to his F45 and gives us an update or sends us a selfie from the gym at F45.
It's all his fault for not being here, is what you're telling me.
I'm sure it can be linked back to that, yes.
That's right. All roads lead back to Sean. This is a gym junkie brand that has major fans across the world, about 70 countries, in fact, but has suffered an 85% fall in its share price. It has had problems with its accounting practices as well. It's now delisting to save the company the cash that it takes to stay compliant. And its share price fell another 26% after F45 made the announcement. Earlier this year, multiple F45 gyms across Australia went into liquidation.
All right. We've covered a lot of ground today, Jen. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. You're speaking with Australian Council of Superannuation Investors CEO Louise Davidson.
Yeah, Louise and I had a really good chat about climate disclosures and her concerns about some businesses falling behind and not treating the issue with the urgency that it needs.
Yeah, and this is a group, the members of this group are very, very influential. I think on average they own 10% of every ASX 200 listed company. So it is a case of when this group listens, businesses do pay attention. So it's well worth listening to that interview. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 18th of August, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.